Well, it looks like there's not much hope left for Brexit anymore. Saboteurs within Britain are doing everything they can to prevent even a vote on Boris's not very good Brexit deal. In fact, I would go outright say that it's a bad deal. Of course, these people don't dislike Boris's deal, for the reasons that I do, which is, of course, that it makes Britain tied far too closely to the EU. It's not a hard enough Brexit. In fact, their problem is quite the opposite. They think that it is way too hard of a Brexit. They think that it puts way too much distance between Britain and the EU. And, of course, to them, too much distance between Britain and the EU is any distance, because they don't want to be an independent country. These people love their cosmopolitan friends in Brussels and in Paris and in Berlin and Rome and all these other capitals. They feel much more at home there than they do, say, in any number of the small towns scattered across Britain. They fundamentally see Brexit as a de-evolution of society. They think that to be British is more primitive than to be European. They are quite literally pan-European nationalists. They seek one European economy with one European people and one European currency under one European government. They see the Brexit movement as the last gasp of Britishness, and that is why they fight so furiously to smother that movement and to starve it of air. And so, even though Boris's not so very good Brexit deal probably would not pass Parliament if Parliament voted on it, they refuse to even hold a vote because if they did, they may, in fact, give Boris the power to oversee a no-deal Brexit scenario. Because if Parliament does in fact vote on this deal, well then Boris may not, under the terms passed by Parliament before, be required legally to ask the European Union for a Brexit extension. And of course then, if Boris doesn't ask for an extension, and then this deal doesn't pass Parliament, well then the UK will leave the European Union on October 31st without a deal, which of course would be the best case scenario as far as I'm concerned. But for them, for these people, for the Euro-nats, as I call them, the European nationalists, this would be apocalypse. Britain truly would become, at that point, an independent country in every sense of the word. Britain would only have to live by its own laws, by its own trade policy, and by the whims of its own parliament. And you would think these men and women, as members of Parliament, who, you would think would be power-hungry, just like all politicians, would be happy about that. You would think that they would want to grab this power for themselves and to not have to share power with the Eurocrats in Brussels. But as they've proven, sometimes ideological commitments can overwhelm, the incentive structures inherent in, social situations. And so they denied Boris his vote on the Brexit deal, forcing Boris to ask the European Union for an extension of 3 months, I believe it is, delaying Brexit until January. And of course, Brexit's been delayed countless times, and it doesn't look like any of the people involved at the top, whether it be on the European side or the British side, really have any plans to do anything else other than delay Brexit in perpetuity, or rather, delay Brexit perpetually. Because they've done everything they can at this point to really make a no-deal Brexit possible, or they've done everything they can to make it impossible. And of course, as I've said before, no Brexit deal is ever going to pass the British Parliament. The only way that Britain comes out of the EU is with no deal. And of course, a no deal Brexit, as I've said countless times, is the only real Brexit because it's the only clean break. It's the only thing that completely severs all political, legal ties with the European Union. But I think that the Parliament has tied up all the loose ends, and that really there's no way to have a no-deal Brexit at this point. I don't think it's going to happen. and so therefore Brexit, period, I don't think is going to happen. The DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party, who I thought was a little bit better on Brexit than Boris, because being Irish, they didn't want to sell out Northern Ireland to the EU and leave them behind in the EU while the island of Britain proper was able to escape from things like the customs union and the Schengen agreement and have its own hard border. It looks like, though, to me that the DUP has gone just full anti-Boris, period, and they are coming to the side of Labour, it would seem, to support, of all things, a customs union with the EU, which to me is, you might as well give up on Brexit entirely, because if you have a customs union with the EU, that comes with all the rest of the garbage that comes with the EU. Essentially, you're being a member of the EU, but without voting rights. That's kind of what it would be like if Britain stayed in the customs union, but left everything else. Because if you're a part of the customs union, you're going to have to abide by EU laws and regulations on everything in order to make your goods, able to pass into the European Union, freely, without any restrictions, without any checks. You have to abide by EU laws. And so if Parliament's going to pass some amendment saying that, Britain can't leave the European Union without an agreement to stay in the customs union, if I were, a Brexit supporter in the UK, I'd totally give up, because there's no point at that stage. If you're staying in the customs union, why leave the EU at all? What's the point? You're going to be within the EU sphere of influence. You're not going to have your own trade policy. You're not going to have an independent economy. You're going to be locked into the European economy, because remember, the European Union, that customs union they want to be a part of, is very protectionist. The EU wants to facilitate trade between European countries and make international trade with other countries rather difficult. There's not a lot of, tariffs are very high in the EU. It's very hard to import goods into the EU. I know people, in the United States who are exporters and have tried to get their products into the EU. It's very difficult because the EU likes to have its own products. And so as long as Britain is in that customs union, even if they're not officially a member of the EU, even if the European flag doesn't fly on it at any official British government institution, they're going to be within the European sphere of influence, and they will never be independent. And so as far as I'm concerned, Britain's pretty much lost. And until the EU crumbles on its own for unrelated reasons, it looks like Britain is going to be a European territory in one way or another. So if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.